After a trial lasting just over 4 weeks, the jury at the Central Criminal Court took almost 9.5 hours to find Mr. Satchwell guilty of murder.
The verdict came more than 6 years after Tina Satchwell vanished from her home, and long after many had stopped expecting answers. A jury found her husband, Richard Satchwell, guilty of her murder. How can a simple staircase hold the key to a shocking crime no one suspected? And could the answers to a mysterious disappearance really be hiding in plain sight, right under everyone's feet?
Richard Satchwell has been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his wife Tina at their home in Cork in March 2017. The court heard victim impact statements.
Too many questions had lingered unanswered, and the place where Tina had been hidden made the case impossible to forget. Tina Satchwell was not a mystery when she was alive. She was known for her warmth, her gentleness, and the quiet consistency of her life. She loved animals deeply, surrounding herself with them and caring for them as companions rather than possessions. She had a strong sense of style and an eye for detail, enjoying clothes and small personal expressions that made daily life feel intentional. To her family, she was a sister, a daughter, an aunt, and a steady presence. Their relationship with her was not marked by drama or fear, but by routine affection and trust. She came from a large and close-knit family, people who remained involved in her life and attentive to her well-being. For much of her adulthood, she lived near them, supported by familiar surroundings and relationships that had been built over decades. That sense of connection mattered. It gave Tina a network of people who knew her patterns, her moods, and her limits. They understood who she was and who she was not. Richard Satchwell entered Tina's life when she was still very young. Their relationship moved quickly. He was older, confident, and decisive. He spoke early about marrying her, framing the relationship as inevitable rather than evolving. Within a relatively short time, they got married. From the outside, it appeared settled, even stable, but the speed with which the relationship formed left little space for balance. Tina's life became increasingly centered on him. In 2016, the couple moved from Fermoy to Youghal, a coastal town in County Cork. The move placed physical distance between Tina and her family. In Youghal, she was more isolated. She did not drive. She relied on Richard for transport and access to the wider world. The couple spent nearly all of their time together. The house they lived in became the primary setting of Tina's life.
And they became further isolated. They had their 2 dogs and the parrot, but Tina was isolated there. She didn't drive herself, and Richard was everywhere, and they wouldn't have spent a day apart in the lead up to her disappearance.
Isolation is rarely dramatic, as it often arrives quietly through logistics rather than arguments. Distance replaces proximity, while dependence replaces choice. Over time, what looks like togetherness can begin to function as control. On March 24, 2017, Richard Satchwell reported Tina missing. He told police she had disappeared 4 days earlier. He said she had left their home voluntarily, taking a significant amount of money with her. The delay in reporting her absence raised concerns immediately. 4 days is a long time to wait when a partner vanishes without explanation. Still, at that point, there was no body and no confirmed crime. Gardaí began searching. They examined the house and searched nearby areas, including the waterfront. They followed leads consistent with a missing person case. Richard remained present throughout this period. He spoke to the police. He spoke to journalists. He spoke publicly, repeatedly, about his fear and confusion. He appeared frequently in media interviews. He appealed directly to Tina, asking her to return. He described his distress, in vivid terms. He presented himself as a man waiting, worrying, and deteriorating under the weight of uncertainty. For some viewers, his openness suggested innocence. For others, it felt excessive. But nothing he said provided proof of wrongdoing. Inside the house, Tina's belongings remained. Clothes she had recently bought, as well as personal items, are carefully arranged. The impression was of a life paused rather than abandoned. Richard showed these items to visitors and journalists. He described the house as unchanged, as though preserving it might bring her back. It was a performance of absence that few questioned at the time. In March 2018, Gardaí launched a major search of woodland near Castlemartyr, roughly 20 kilometers from Youghal.
There have been 220 separate lines of inquiry conducted. This has included liaison with Interpol, and today we are conducting a search here at Mitchell's Wood.
The operation covered more than 40 acres and lasted nearly 2 weeks. It was conducted close to the first anniversary of Tina's disappearance, a moment when hope and dread often converge. Nothing of evidential value was found. Once again, the trail went cold. Years passed. Tina's family lived with uncertainty that never settled into grief, because there was no confirmation of death, no remains to mourn, and no clear account of what had happened. Richard continued to maintain his story. Tina, he said, had left him. She had taken money. She did not want to be found. Behind this narrative, another story was quietly forming. Richard described Tina as volatile and violent, portraying himself as the victim of repeated attacks. This characterization did not align with the memories of those who knew her. Her family rejected it entirely. But without evidence to contradict him, the claims lingered. The breakthrough came in October 2023. Gardaí arrested Richard Satchwell on suspicion of murder. This time, the investigation moved differently. His house in Youghal was sealed off. A more intrusive search began. Builders were brought in, floors were lifted, walls were examined. The focus was no longer limited to visible surfaces. Under the stairs in the sitting room, investigators found human remains. Tina Satchwell had been buried inside her own home. The discovery reframed everything. The interviews, the appeals, and the years of waiting. The room where journalists had sat, where conversations had taken place, where Tina's belongings had been displayed. Beneath it all, she had been there the entire time. When confronted with this evidence, Richard changed his story. He claimed that Tina had attacked him with a tool. He said he fell backwards. He said he acted in self-defense, that her death occurred during a struggle he could not fully recall. He described the event as a blur.
During this trial, Tina was portrayed in a way that is not true to who she was. Tina was our precious sister, cousin, auntie, and daughter. Her presence in our life meant so much.
The prosecution described this account as self-serving and implausible. At trial, the jury heard evidence spanning years. They saw Richard's media appearances. They heard about the missing person report, the searches, and the evolving explanations. They learned about the isolation Tina experienced after the move to Youghal. They were asked to consider whether the killing had been an act of self-defense or a deliberate response to a perceived loss of control. The prosecution argued that Tina had threatened to leave and that Richard could not accept it. They said he intended to kill or cause serious harm. The defense focused on gaps in the investigation, questioning why the house had not been fully excavated in 2017, why forensic opportunities were delayed, and whether earlier discovery might have clarified the cause of death. After more than 9 hours of deliberation, the jury rejected the claim of self-defense. They found Richard Satchwell guilty of murder. In court, Tina's family spoke about the impact of her loss and the distortion of her character during the trial. They described her as kind, gentle, and loving. They spoke of manipulation and control. They spoke of years spent clinging to hope while being misled. Their words did not seek revenge. They sought recognition of who Tina truly was. Richard Satchwell showed little visible reaction to the verdict. He was sentenced to the mandatory term of life imprisonment. His legal team indicated an intention to appeal. The sentence closed the criminal case, but it did not close the story. Questions remain about the investigation itself. Why was the house not dug up earlier? Why are certain forensic steps delayed? Gardaí acknowledged that the case took longer than it should have. An internal review was expected. These questions do not alter the verdict, but they shape its context. They speak to the limits of systems and the cost of delay. Tina Satchwell's case is troubling, not because it lacks answers, but because of how long those answers remained buried. It shows how control can masquerade as care, how isolation can be mistaken for intimacy, and how truth can be hidden in plain sight. Her life ended quietly, but the consequences of what was done to her will remain, carried by her family and remembered by a community that lived for years beside a secret no one was supposed to find. In the end, Tina is not defined by the manner of her death or the deception that followed. She is remembered as she was in life, a person of gentleness, attachment, and quiet strength. Justice arrived late, but it arrived with clarity, and that clarity leaves behind not shock, but a sober understanding of what happens when control goes unchecked and accountability is delayed.
At the end of the day, Gardaí did get justice for Tina Satchwell and her family. They did determine the answer ultimately, but it took far too long, and I think some investigators would.
And that understanding carries an obligation beyond the courtroom. Tina's case exposes how easily warning signs can be normalized when they develop slowly, wrapped in the language of devotion and concern. There were no dramatic public confrontations, no sudden disappearance into an unfamiliar world. Instead, there was a gradual narrowing of space, a life reduced to a single house, a single routine, a single version of events controlled by one person. For years, that version went largely unchallenged. It was repeated often enough to sound plausible, delivered with confidence and persistence. In the absence of evidence, it filled the silence where Tina's own voice should have been. When her remains were finally found, the silence ended, but the damage had already been done. Time had eroded evidence, memory, and trust. What remains now is not just a record of a crime, but a reminder of responsibility, personal, institutional, and collective. Responsibility to question narratives that rely on erasing another person's character. Responsibility to recognize isolation as a risk, not a private choice. Responsibility to act decisively when uncertainty stretches on too long. Tina Satchwell's life mattered long before her death was understood. Remembering her fully means refusing to let the years of deception overshadow who she was, or what might have been prevented if the truth had surfaced sooner. Her absence continues to shape the lives of those who knew her, not as an abstract tragedy, but as a daily reality marked by unanswered moments and altered futures. Birthdays, family gatherings, ordinary milestones now carry an awareness of who should have been there. Justice, while necessary, cannot restore those lost continuities. It can only acknowledge the harm and formally assign responsibility for it. The case also lingers as a study in how crimes within private spaces often resist early detection. Homes are assumed to be places of safety, and when harm occurs there, It is frequently concealed behind routine and familiarity. In Tina's case, the setting itself became part of the deception, its normal appearance masking what lay beneath. That concealment was not accidental. It was deliberate, sustained, and dependent on time. As years pass, the legal record will remain, but the human record must be preserved with equal care. Tina should be remembered not as a subject of suspicion or controversy, but as a person whose life was narrowed and then taken. Her story stands as a warning about the cost of unchecked control and the dangers of believing that silence means peace. He was sentenced to life in prison. The decision brought a form of justice, but it did not bring relief. Too much time had passed. If this story grabbed your attention, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.